6:30 a.m., cold steel doors, the echo of heavy boots against concrete floors. Jimmy Reeves adjusted his collar and straightened his new prison guard badge at Maryland State Penitentiary. 23 years old with a mortgage underwater and a baby on the way, he'd finally landed a stable government job with health benefits. The prison corridor stretched before him like his future, gray, confined, but secure. "A cell 37 has a weird one," Officer Martinez said during morning briefing. "Barely speaks. Thinks he's too good for us. Refused the draft on some religious grounds. Just watch him." Jimmy nodded, feeling the weight of his new nightstick against his hip. His father had served in Korea. His brother was fighting in Vietnam. Draft dodgers made his blood boil. The man in cell 37 sat cross-legged on his bunk, eyes closed in meditation. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they could crush stone. But there was something else, a stillness about him that seemed out of place in this chaotic prison. "Rise and shine, princess." Jimmy banged his baton against the bars. "Breakfast time for all American heroes. And whatever you are." The prisoner opened his eyes slowly, but didn't respond. Just stared through Jimmy like he wasn't there. "What's wrong? Too important to talk? Your investment portfolio taking a hit being in here." Jimmy laughed at his own joke. "Well, your 5-star accommodations await in the cafeteria." The prisoner stood with unexpected grace, a disciplined economy of movement. His eyes, Jimmy would remember this moment years later, held no anger, just a patient dignity that made Jimmy's mockery feel small. Throughout that first week, Jimmy made cell 37 his special project. Something about the silent man's composure felt like a personal challenge. "Hey, draft dodger, how's that freedom of religion working out for you?" Jimmy would call as he passed. "My brother's dodging bullets while you're dodging responsibility." The prisoner never responded, just continued his routine, reading books, exercising with precise movements that seemed almost choreographed, and writing letters that Jimmy sometimes intercepted and read aloud to other guards. "Listen to this poetry," Jimmy snickered in the break room. "The man who views the world at 50 the same as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life." Deep thoughts from our resident philosopher in 37. What Jimmy didn't mention was how those words had actually stuck with him on his drive home to his pregnant wife and their underwater mortgage in a neighborhood that wasn't what the realtor had promised. If this story has made you feel something already, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. That night, Jimmy's wife Carol showed him their past due medical bills spread across their kitchen table like a roadmap to financial ruin. "The high-risk pregnancy specialist isn't covered by our health insurance," she explained, circles under her eyes darker than the previous day. "And we need a premium plan that covers specialized care. The doctor says our baby might have complications." Jimmy felt the weight of fatherhood pressing down. "I just started this job. The benefits haven't even kicked in yet. Maybe we could get a personal loan, or refinance the mortgage," Carol suggested, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. Jimmy thought about the prisoner in cell 37. The man had given up fame and fortune for his principles. At least that's what the other guards had started telling him. Jimmy was beginning to piece together that his weird one might be someone important, but he couldn't place him yet. "I'll figure something out," Jimmy promised. I always do. But as he lay awake that night, financial anxiety gnawing at his insides, Jimmy wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake taking a job mocking men who seemed to have figured out what truly mattered in life. 2 weeks into his new position, Jimmy's world began unraveling faster than he could tie it back together. The mortgage refinancing application was denied due to their debt-to-income ratio. Carol's pregnancy was classified as high risk, requiring weekly appointments with specialists who charged fees that made Jimmy's stomach turn. "You need to focus on building an emergency fund," advised the financial consultant they couldn't really afford but desperately needed. "Your current situation is unsustainable without a significant change in income or expenses." That same afternoon, the warden called Jimmy into his office. "Reeves, I need someone for extra shifts in the high-security wing. Time and a half pay." Interested? Jimmy almost shouted yes. The overtime could help with Carol's prenatal care. Maybe even start that emergency fund the consultant mentioned. The high-security wing housed political prisoners, conscientious objectors, and celebrities awaiting trial. And there, in the first cell Jimmy encountered on his new assignment, sat the silent man from cell 37, now relocated. "We've got him in isolation after some reporters tried sneaking in," explained Officer Wilson. "Too many autograph requests coming through the mail system." "Autographs?" Jimmy asked. "For a draft dodger?" Wilson gave him a strange look. "You really don't know who he is." Before Jimmy could respond, alarms blared through the facility. A fight had broken out in the general population area. All available officers were called to respond. In the chaos that followed, Jimmy suffered a deep cut from a makeshift knife, requiring 17 stitches and medical leave. As he sat in the emergency room, blood seeping through his temporary bandage, he thought about how quickly life could change. One moment a prison guard, the next a patient weighing the cost of stitches against his family's dwindling savings. "This treatment will be fully covered by your workers' compensation insurance," the nurse assured him, noticing his worried expression. "The prison has excellent liability coverage for on-the-job injuries." Relief washed over Jimmy, followed immediately by shame. He had health coverage for his wound, but his unborn child remained vulnerable to both medical complications and financial disaster. During his mandatory week of medical leave, Jimmy's world continued its downward spiral. Carol developed preeclampsia, requiring hospitalization and constant monitoring. Their checking account dwindled to double digits. The mortgage payment loomed 5 days away. "We could ask your parents for help," Carol suggested from her hospital bed. "Dad would rather die than loan money," Jimmy replied. "Says it destroys families." That night, alone in their half-furnished house, Jimmy found an envelope he'd confiscated weeks earlier from the silent prisoner's outgoing mail. He'd forgotten to turn it in. Inside was a letter and a check made out to a children's hospital in Chicago. The signature caught his eye, and suddenly Jimmy understood everything. The check was signed Muhammad Ali. The silent prisoner, the man Jimmy had been mocking for weeks, was Muhammad Ali, the former heavyweight champion of the world who had refused military induction based on his religious beliefs. Jimmy sat down hard on his couch, the check trembling in his hand. The greatest boxer in the world had endured Jimmy's petty taunts without a word. The champion who could have broken Jimmy in half had responded to cruelty with dignified silence. And here was proof of another truth. While imprisoned and stripped of his title and livelihood, Ali was still sending money to sick children. What kind of man was Jimmy Reeves by comparison? Jimmy returned to work with 17 stitches and a changed perspective. He requested assignment back to the high-security wing, where Muhammad Ali resided in isolation. "Morning, champ," Jimmy said quietly, sliding a breakfast tray through the slot. Ali looked up, surprise flickering across his face at the title of respect. "I owe you an apology," Jimmy continued, voice low, so other guards wouldn't hear. "I didn't know who you were, but that's no excuse for how I behaved." Ali studied him for a long moment. "Your knowing my name wouldn't have made me more deserving of respect than any other man in here." It was the first time Jimmy had heard him speak. His voice was softer than expected, thoughtful. "My wife's in the hospital," Jimmy blurted out. "Baby's coming early. They're saying he might need special care. Insurance won't cover everything. I don't know what to do." Ali stood and approached the bars. "When you're poor, you're called lazy. When you're rich, you're called greedy. When you're neither, you're called responsible. When you try to help others, you're called naive." Jimmy blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means labels don't define a man's worth or his options," Ali replied. "Only his actions do." That conversation marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. During quiet moments on night shifts, Jimmy would share his worries, and Ali would offer perspectives Jimmy had never considered. "Your financial advisor told you to build an emergency fund," Ali said one night. "Hey, but did he tell you how to build wealth when you're starting with nothing?" "No," Jimmy admitted. "Just said we need to spend less." When you have nothing, you can't save your way to something, Allie reasoned. You need to find ways to earn more while maintaining discipline. Easy for a heavyweight champion to say, Jimmy muttered. I started boxing for $5 a fight, Allie replied, and right now, I have nothing. They took my title, my income, my freedom, but they can't take my mind or my principles. Jimmy thought about this as he drove to the hospital after his shift. Carol's condition had stabilized, but their son had been born prematurely, weighing just over 4 pounds. The neonatal intensive care unit would be their baby's home for weeks, possibly months. The medical bills arrived before the baby came home, numbers so large they seemed fictional. The financial advisor had suggested bankruptcy as a last resort. Medical bankruptcy is more common than you'd think, he'd said, as if that made it less devastating. But Jimmy remembered Ali's words about earning more. During his lunch break, he approached the warden with a proposal. The prison library needs organization. I could work extra hours cataloging books, setting up a better checkout system. Inmates could learn to read better, maybe have better options when they get out. The warden looked skeptical. And why would you want to do this? Extra pay, Jimmy admitted honestly. And maybe it makes a difference. To his surprise, the warden approved the project with additional hourly compensation. That evening, Jimmy told Allie about his small victory. That's how it starts. Allie nodded. One decision to move forward instead of giving up. Later that week, while organizing books in the prison library, Jimmy discovered an entire section on personal finance, entrepreneurship, and investment strategies. Books that had sat untouched for years. He began bringing them to Ali, who devoured the information and passed on key insights. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world, Ali quoted from one book. The miracle of compound growth applies to more than money. It applies to knowledge, to relationships, to all things that can grow with consistent attention. As weeks passed, Jimmy applied these principles. He negotiated with the hospital for a payment plan. He started a simple side business helping prison staff with tax preparation after learning from library books. He advocated for Carol when insurance denied claims. And each night he visited his son in the NICU, watching the miracle of compound growth as the tiny boy gained ounces, then pounds. He's a fighter, the nurse told him one evening, just like his dad. Jimmy thought about the real fighter back at the prison, not the one who used his fists, but the one who fought with his principles intact. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Jimmy was called to the warden's office. His heart raced as he imagined another crisis to face. Instead, the warden handed him a letter. You've been requested as a personal escort. Supreme Court's reviewing Ali's case next month. His legal team wants preliminary meetings. Jimmy scanned the official request. Why me? Apparently, he asked for you specifically. The assignment meant a significant pay increase. Specialized security details were compensated at consultant rates. It also meant working closely with Ali's high-powered legal team, which included some of the most prestigious attorneys in the country. During the first meeting, as lawyers discussed complex constitutional arguments, Jimmy stood quietly by the door. Afterward, Ali motioned him over. Your boy doing better? He asked. Coming home next week, Jimmy nodded. Finally crossed the 5-pound mark. And the hospital bills. We've worked out a payment plan. I'm doing tax prep on the side now. Carol's starting a medical billing specialist certification once she's recovered. We're not drowning anymore, just treading water. Ali smiled. Better than sinking. One of the attorneys approached them. Mr. Ali, we need to discuss the investment options for your future legal defense fund. There are tax implications depending on how we structure it. Jimmy began to step away, but Ali gestured for him to stay. Jimmy here has been studying financial planning. Might be interesting for him. The attorney looked skeptical but continued his explanation of trust structures, liability protection, and tax-advantaged accounts. Jimmy listened intently, connecting concepts from his library books to real-world applications. What about using a charitable remainder trust? Jimmy suggested during a pause. If Mr. Ali's primary concern is supporting causes he believes in while maintaining some income for legal expenses. The room fell silent. The attorney stared at Jimmy with newfound respect. That's actually a sophisticated approach. Where did you study finance? Maryland State Penitentiary Library, Jimmy answered honestly. Ali laughed, a full, genuine laugh that filled the room. See? The man learns fast when properly motivated. The following weeks brought dramatic changes. Ali's case gained national attention. Jimmy's role expanded from security to informal liaison between Ali and the prison administration. The warden, noticing Jimmy's growing financial acumen, asked him to review the prison's budget allocation system. One evening, as they awaited another legal meeting, Ali handed Jimmy a business card. "My investment manager," he explained. "And when I get out of here, and I will, I'll need someone who understands both finance and people, someone who's seen both sides of fortune. He's looking for an apprentice." Jimmy stared at the card. "I'm a prison guard with a GED. You're a man who faced bankruptcy and found another way. You're a father who fought for his son when the system said no. You're someone who admitted when he was wrong and worked to make it right." Ali leaned forward. "That's worth more than any degree." The Supreme Court would eventually rule in Ali's favor. He would return to boxing, reclaim his title, and become a global icon for standing by his principles regardless of cost. Jimmy would never become famous, but he would take that business card and call the number. He would apprentice while working nights at the prison. He would learn about creating security beyond a paycheck, about investment strategies, tax-advantaged education accounts for his son, and insurance policies that actually protected families in crisis. 5 years after that cold morning when he'd mocked a silent prisoner, Jimmy Reeves would open his own financial advisory firm specializing in helping working-class families build generational wealth. His first client seminar would be held in a community center Muhammad Ali helped fund, and on his office wall would hang a framed quote, "The man who views the world at 50 the same as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life." Below it, a personal note from the champion himself. To Jimmy, who didn't waste a single day once he saw clearly. With respect, Muhammad Ali. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hands to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back. Comment. Subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.